that cost do you generate? That's to say, how much revenue do you generate? Yeah.
All right, so let me again take that in strides. So our total expenditure averages to $4.5 billion. Our income, which is made up of light and power, so if you use $3.1 billion and $300 million for additional income, which we acquire via pole rental, we have shares in power gen, right, and we have capital contribution and so on. When you add up that averages to 3.4, gives you a loss of $1.1 billion.
$1.1 billion is actually what we might call your subsidy, is that correct?
Right, so that $1.1 billion that you would consider to be the subsidy would generally be the difference in the gas price from NGC, which we do not pay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll come to that because
Sure.
there's a bigger...
So that is just to put it in perspective in terms of where that difference is actually dealt with.
There's a bigger issue.
Right? Sure.
Okay, but I notice here in some of the documents that you actually have receivables from government of about $1 billion, just over 900 million. Huh? How do you deal with that?
Right, but really...
I know this is not recurrent.
Sure, it
right?
is. It's not. But I prefer to answer it. Yes, we have receivables from government, but government also deals with the other issue of payment of the gas, right, of the NGC payment, which they have settled in full up to December 2018 to the tune of $5 billion.
Yes.
Which is in a loan arrangement, which we have I indicated to you.
Okay. Now, I know you have a plan that you're working on, and we may ask some more questions on that, but does the plan that you have solve the problem of self-sufficiency or viability for T&TEC? Does it do that?
Right. So, Chairman, that's an excellent question you've asked. So what we have been doing really in terms of our business operation, every kilowatt hour we sell, we lose 11 cents, all right, in the whole analysis. So we lose 11 cents. So the plan is, how do you bridge that gap, really, which, as we have said, is roughly $1 billion, right, to be self-sufficient. Sorry? Per year. So what we have been doing is there are a number of initiatives, right, that we have been trying to get done. But of course, the impact on those initiatives are not that significant. A good example is our pole rental.
Yeah.
We leverage all our poles to providers who use it to install the cables and other equipment, and we're looking at other avenues like we have the Wi-Fi antennas that we are looking at very closely. We are looking at also some advertisement in some of the locations like the Queen's Park, Savannah, and so on, some of those locations. That is going to bring in and generate additional revenue. In parallel to that, every avenue that we have to bring in revenue, additional revenue, we have engaged that process, right? You would have seen where we signal things like our generator license arrangements, when we do major contracting, when we work as a private, for somebody else in a private location where they could get other people, we have a cost that we charge for that, not related to T&TEC work, right, but as a contractor, right? Those are avenues where we look to make additional, income, right, to meet our requirements.
So you had about 10 areas.
Correct, and we have a business unit that the board had set up in this term, and the purpose of that business unit is really for that exact reason. The point is, Chairman, we're not sitting by and saying, okay, we need to get any increase, or we need to do this or that or the other. We have to see how we could bridge that gap at T&TEC. And we're looking at every possible avenue that we could use to get there.
All right. Now, the acting permanent secretary, when she spoke, she talked about benchmarked against other organizations or institutions in electricity. In electricity distribution, I suspect it would be in this case, that you do fairly well and that you are a high-performance organization. Now, could you help me by, first of all, understanding how you are ranked and who you are ranked with, first of all? And secondly, if you are high performing, but still find yourself in a situation where you are not self-sustaining and you are taking steps to do that, what is the particular dilemma you have as a high-performing organization that allows you not to be able to sustain yourself, or that might allow you to sustain yourself?
So, Chairman, let me take it in the two sections that you have asked for. So we benchmark key indicators, what you call SIDI, KIDI, SIFI, ASI. Those are reliability indicators that we benchmark with a number of utilities, both in the Caribbean, Canada, and North America, and other locations in North America. Okay. And when you do the comparison, now, of course, when you do the benchmarking and you do the analysis, you also have to look at the peculiarity of our business operation. Yeah. In a region where the pattern is a certain arrangement against other institutions and so on. And when you do the comparison, the figures show almost equivalent. Of course, there are room for improvement, but when we do that and we look at our reliability indicators, they show that factor. So I'll come back to that point just now, but then to get there, the question is, how do you get better? So let's understand what is happening with us. Our rates, and we're not going to rate review anything here, I want to make that clear, no controversy in terms of that, but our rates is 5.5 US cents per kilowatt hour. If you go into Jamaica, it's 30 cents. If you go into Barbados, it's 28 cents. If you step across to Canada, there are 3 different categories, 10, 14, and 20 cents, right? And they have what you call a transport cost of 15.5 cents. So when you blend that off, it's about 14 cents. But bear in mind that we operate our business here. So I'm going to say this one a little slow. At 5.5 cents US per kilowatt hour. The gas that we get from the National Gas Company is sold at $1.54 US per MMBTU. The true price of that gas is really, well, it's a little low now because of the issues in the market. Yeah. But the true price of that gas is $3. So the gas itself is subsidized by the government of Trinidad and Tobago by half the price. If we were to make an assumption that we were to pay the true price of the gas, that's $1 billion more. I'm just throwing the analysis a little bit in the discussion.
No, I'm glad that you're doing it, because these are important things to understand.
So if that's $1 billion more, and our income for light and power is $3.1 billion, then you have to go up by 2 cents. So I'm saying 5, let's say 6 cents, then you go up by 8 cents to pay the true price of the gas. So I'm saying then that if you want to look at that and say, well, okay, fine, let us see how, let's level the playing field and see where the utility is comparable to anywhere in the world. So I'm saying 6 plus the 2, that's 8, right? So you put yourself, sorry, I didn't say it correct. So 6 plus 2, that 2 cents will allow you to meet your commitments, right? And pay a normal price of gas. If you double the price, then that's 2 cents more. So that's now 10 cents. So I want to say, let me say it back slowly again. So right now we are operating at a loss.
Remember, people are listening to you, so that they want to understand, right?
Sure, that's why, in the electricity business, we tend to move fast, but sorry about that. Yeah. All right, let me go back again. So as I say, we are operating at a loss of $1 billion. If we were 2 cents more, then we would not operate at that loss of $1 billion. So that takes it from 6 to 8. If you then want to pay the true price of the gas, take 2 cents more. Yeah. So that takes it to 10 cents. So now you have to sit back and say, okay, well, good. If T&TEC is at 10 cents, they would be meeting all the commitments, because other than the NGC and the gas issue, we owe nobody else. We owe no other company. We have one problem, one issue, and one trouble to deal with, and that's the, so we say, well, look, we'll focus on that, right? Okay. NGC.
NGC.
We pay everybody else. We own no other institution in this country.
And NGC represents two problems. One is the debt, and the second one is the
Correct.
price of natural
Correct.
gas.
Right. So I've reached 10 cents to meet the thing. And I'm using that now as a benchmark to compare anywhere else in the world, right? So I'm saying, if you use the utility now and say, well, let's see how we are operating compared to anywhere else in the world. And we are still below, right? And being able to meet all our commitments. 2 cents more will do magic at the institution. But I'm just saying we're not going to get there. 2 US cents, of course, right? Yeah. But we know we're not going to get there. And I'm saying this in the dialogue that we're having, but as a utility and a management, right, fully supported by the Ministry of Public Utilities, our intention is to see how we can acquire this kind of funding otherwise, right, to reduce the burden on anybody else. We're not sitting by and saying, this is what should happen.
But what would that 4 US cents more translate to the customer in TT cents?
Right, so then you're talking, right.
In
So
TT cents.
Right, so 35 cents TT is what the blend of average cost of per kilowatt is right now, 35 cents. So if you were to add that, you would end up with about, I would say, about, about 50, 55 to 60 cents. 60 cents. Yeah, 60 cents.
To the customer?
Yeah,
TT?
which of course, right, so let's say that, so you realize we can't go there, right?
But wait, let me understand that. I want to understand that in a way.
Sorry.
You don't have to be defensive.
I know.
We are talking about a principal utility without which we cannot function.
Sure.
And I think it's important to raise the issues. So what that means to, let's say, me as a customer, if I'm paying $1 for electricity, is that I'm now going to pay, if this were done, $1.60. Is that it? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that what it translates into?
Yes.
All right. So what it means then, though, to the customer is that it would mean to the customer a 60% increase, all things being equal.
Yeah, in that region, is that a head in that direction?
All right. So
certainly not.
So that is why the
Right.
issue is so prohibitive.
Right, but Chairman,
Right.
one point to raise. But bear in mind that that is transferred at different levels. Yeah? So the industrial levels,
Yeah, they would pay more.
Right, and the domestic, which is domestic customer tends to be much
so
lower.
you'd net
Right.
off one against the
Correct.
other.
It is the cost to provide the service. So while we say that figure, so that the domestic would be much lower than the others, right? Because the actual cost to provide service when you do the analysis based on the RIC Act and so on.
Okay. Well, I think although this is not an issue that we could resolve here, and it is not within the domain of T&TEC, it really is in the domain of RIC, and we will address some of those issues here. But I do want to say that it's important that the public understand what is involved. If you want a self-sustainable, unsubsidized T&TEC, then what it means is a 60% increase in electricity cost across the board, but managed in such a way that you offset industrial costs against household costs. And that is what it would take, and that would solve the problem not of NGC debt, but it would solve the problem of the gap between the price of gas and the price at which T&TEC pays for the gas. But the debt would still remain, and that would be another solution that would have to be found, separate and distinct from any annual arrangements of revenue and expenditure. Okay? So we've cleared that. I think we understand it clearly now, and I think we understand why it is such a problematic issue and why it is a political hot potato. Having said that, I just want to ask two quick questions before I go to Member Leonce, because he would have to leave us early. The question I wanted to ask you is that When you, no, I better not ask that question now, because I think that there might be other things that people want to ask. I just want to flag one thing for just to kind of summarize and to also let the public know what we are about, right? Which is that what we did on the last occasion when we did the report and made the recommendations is that we made a number, about 6 or 7 recommendations in there. And I will just flag what they had to do with. One was the status of debt owed to the National Gas Company. I won't go into that. Secondly, the financial viability and sustainability of the commission, which in fact came up here as an issue and which you addressed. Thirdly, the deteriorating liquidity position, and I mean, you hinted at that, but someone may want to ask a follow-up question on that. Issue number 4 was abuse of sick leave provision. Issue number 5 was low productivity. And issue number 6 was high overtime costs. And there is another issue which is not flagged here in the document, the issue of renewable energy and the possible inclusion on the grid of renewable energy from producers outside of T&TEC.
On the matter of power reduction and getting into viability, let me just start first of all with the gas aspect. When you went there were a number of inefficient machines that were being there, so you start probing with the engineers and so on, what are the machines, what is the configuration, what is best for the grid. So now, whereas we were consuming something like 280 million standard cubic feet of gas per day, that was reduced to about 240. So the country saved 40 million standard cubic feet daily. So by its spinning reserve, by the dispatch of machines, by fine-tuning all the time, that is happening on a continuous basis. At the staff level, as I said in my little introductory statement, you have manpower audits being conducted, how the staff is configured, how do you deploy them, how do you improve the efficiency, improve the productivity. This is a constant process that is happening at T&TEC. With the power purchase agreement, that reduction, has met with, you could well imagine, is that, as we say the old adage, a bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. So suppliers will be in that position. They have a contract. And if you're asking them to say, reduce that contract, you say, well, what have you got for me? That's something in the future. It's that kind of negotiation that takes place, and it's not an easy negotiation but it is being pursued. You might find me sounding a little pessimistic about the outcome, but I think I could understand from the investor. He has invested his money, he's put down a plant, he has commitments to his financial people and so on. So if you ask him to reduce now, it impacts him. But the strategy we're trying to engage is to ask them to lessen the contract now, but we would then extend it in the future. So that's why I'm giving the idea, bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. That's the question that we're really asking. So that is being pursued, as well as trying to use up the surplus capacity. But I think that has to be measured also with gas. Sometimes we have to keep that in mind, that we want to sell more electricity, but if you sell more electricity, you use more gas. So it's a balancing act all the time, So I don't know if I answered your question in its entirety. I hope I captured some of it.
Can you tell me the power purchase agreements that you currently have? What is the duration? Let's just assume that you're not successful in getting them to reduce now. What is the duration of these agreements, from when to when, and how does that impact
There are three power producers. PowerGen's contract will come to an end in 2029. That's the 1994 and 2005. The 2005 ends in 2035, but that is for small portions, for 2 machines in Point Lisas. The Trinity ends in 2028. That's a small producer, 225 megawatts, as the general manager mentioned you. 210 is the contracted amount. And the one for TGU, I think, goes close to 2040, 41. So you're asking a very important question. There comes a point in time of what happens, and that is the kind of conversation we are trying to have with PowerGen, that your contract is due in 2028. We have some surplus power now. You have some old machines. Can you look and see whether you want to change out these machines and lowering the amount that you produce now, with the intention of extending you in the future? That is the kind of conversation that is taking place. So it becomes a kind of phase thing where you don't get jolted or shocked at one point in time. Remember, some of the machines in Point Lisas were installed in 1976 or thereabouts, so some of them are about 40, 45 years old. So it's being actively pursued, and it is the hope of T&TEC that towards the middle of this year, there will be a sort of comprehensive paper that deals with this very issue. Because if these things don't work out, then what happens? What is the projection? When should we have new power in the country? And that is being worked on at the moment.
And you said you're working on a paper that will be ready by the middle of this year?
That's what we are targeting, to get there on that.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay. Ayana. Okay.
Hi, good morning. There was mention of the pole top antenna service, and I wanted to know how far negotiations would have taken in terms of that.
Right, so negotiation went, I would say, fairly far with regards to that transaction, except it broke down, and we are still engaged in further discussion when the particular provider indicated that he wanted us to sign off on an exclusivity clause, which we could not allow, because we could not just allow one provider as a public utility. So that broke down the discussions, which we intend to re-engage with the hope that we could, and of course any other providers, with the expectation that we could encourage that use, and of course bring in additional revenue to T&TEC.
If the negotiations don't progress, would you send out another expression of interest, or just engage the ones who have responded previously?
No, we will go back out with an EY. Yes.
Okay. Another area I wanted to follow up on. Chairman, you noted that there's a good culture within the organization. The staff, they're relatively happy, and a relatively stable industrial relations climate. But in your submission, I noticed that it would have been a couple of years since you all had a staff appreciation function or anything of that sort, right? So what do you do to keep them motivated then? And when you plan to?
I would give the staff the credit. They're self-motivated. They love T&TEC. I would take some of the responsibility for cutting off some of that. I think we needed to show in the country also, and I think the staff went along with that. That although it was a function that was done once a year, that we too should show some level of frugality, of belt tightening wherever we can. And I don't think that you got too much objection. People understood. I think we didn't do it totally, but departments were able to still have their little. People are still recognized in a smaller way. We want to reintroduce it this year because we felt we have kept it for a long time, and we don't want it to die. But I think it was done in that context of showing, well, we too should be tightening our belts, and we cannot appear to be having some lavish function while the rest of the country is having.
But what's the average cost for that function?
It could be between $500,000 and $700,000.
Okay.
It used to be a grand affair with maybe, the staff is 3,000 people. Not all of them will be invited, but you're dealing with awards from 35 years going down to say maybe 15 years. So it's quite.
Which carries a value.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Just one other question, for this round. You mentioned the excess capacity, and this is something you have to break down so I would understand it and I could explain to my constituents. You have all this excess capacity in terms of energy produced, right? And then in a number of communities, not only in Tobago, you will hear your customers complain about low voltage. So what's the correlation? How do I explain that to people in not only Tobago East, but people throughout Trinidad? People will say, okay, if they're producing too much, then how come we are being affected on the other end with low voltage situation?
I'll take it. I just want to identify one more point with the chairman's position on the long service and so on. That transition, and chairman reiterated that, took place when management come down. So everything throughout the organization, everything has been cut to bare minimum, right? Only essential, right? As we manage the business as best as we could. So just to say it goes from all throughout the length and breadth of the commission. Right, so your point is quite correct. So I have the capacity, but it's to get it to the customers in the best of ways. That's the most efficient of ways. So yes, that is where we lose points. We will not deny that we have pockets of issues, right? Where people complain of low voltage. You would have outages in some locations and so on that we really have to continue to work on. One thing I could say very clearly, so especially in Tobago, there are a lot of things happening, especially on the north side and so on, a number of activities. We are redoing over, we are installing the second transformer, study park and all those things like that. That will help to make things, of course, much better. The issue, though, is that we will have to lose points in there with what you have raised. We really could do better in there. And having the capacity, yes, but being able to respond, right, more effectively, we will have to do better in there. So that's an internal issue.
What is the strategy? What is the plan to improve
Right.
it? Because I could go back and say,
Sure.
okay, they admit, yes, they're
Sure.
losing points
Sure.
on that, but that
Sure.
wouldn't satisfy the man
So,
on the
sure.
ground.
So we recognize, and it has come, we recognize that that's one or two of the weak points where, especially in the outlying areas, you have the issues of outages and low voltage. So we have again targeted what is necessary to make sure that we actually get better and better. We measure it, We measure it. So the plan is our tree trimming, our redeployment of our crews to make sure that we are, continue to be as effective as we are to focus on the issue. So we have the complaints. I wouldn't want to say that we don't. And I don't want to sit here and deny that we don't. So we have the complaints, right? Our system is a lot more advanced in that we could detect more information now, right, at our remote ends. All our meters are smart meters, right? It is a matter of getting out there a little bit more. So in terms of the corrections, redeploying the crews, to continue to focus on those issues. That has continued to happen. The pace is not as fast as it should.
You set targets?
Yeah, we have set targets,
Okay.
correct. We have a Tobago Affairs meeting every month. Mr. Chapman is the chairman of that committee. He's the chairman of the Tobago Affairs meeting. And those matters, exactly what you raised, I know we have issues in Trinidad also, have come up in Tobago and is measured, right? So we get in there. We are getting there, but certainly we are not there yet. I want to make that clear. So, right? But we do in fact monitor and in fact actually do what is required to see how we could improve further and further.
Just one more question. Driving around some of the rural areas in Trinidad and in my own constituency, I would notice the rotten poles. And sometimes when we try to find out, because if people in Trinidad, even I'm an MP for Tobago, will contact me. They will ask, okay, well, whose pole? And they contact T&TEC, they're not taking ownership. Contact TTEC, they're not taking ownership. So we have poles up, rotten poles, hazard to not only property but people, and nobody's claiming ownership. How do you, one, identify your poles too, and what would you have done in the recent past to remove all your wooden poles and bring in the nice shiny silver ones? I don't know the
Galvanized,
yes, that one.
galvanized and concrete. So okay, I feel I could safely say that we are very advanced in our pole installations and the type of poles we have. And there are very few wood poles that exist on the system. There are one or two that are the steel poles that might be rotten at the base and so on. But we've transferred that to galvanized steel poles as well as concrete poles. You may have one or two issues, but as we focus on pole replacement every year. I would want to say that the majority of those poles may not belong to us. So but the point though, and I think I got your point clear, is that when you get those calls, customer doesn't say anybody, call T&TEC. We do in fact respond, and we make contact with whoever is the owner of that pole. The directive that I've always given to our staff is that when you get there, make it safe, regardless of who is the owner, right? But you are right, there are situations that I'm aware of poles that are not in the best of conditions, but I want to be fair enough, most of which don't belong to T&TEC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Morning. I just want to jump off of Mrs. Webster Roy's questions about the reliability and the low voltage issues in Tobago and focus on Trinidad, because that's also a major issue in Trinidad in quite a number of areas. What's the Commission's policy and plans to deal with those situations, because it's very real?
Right, so the reliability issues, the board measures that also, and one of the key things that we have observed, which we know, so I don't want to attempt to say that we are not aware, is vegetation management. So that is one of the items that we have recognized that continue to give us trouble, and therefore it was raised. We have done a number of both internally and external engagements to deal with that vegetation management. That is being measured by the reliability committee of the board. So I think you'd see things better, not 100% perfect, but you'd certainly see improvements in that direction, and that would take care of the majority of the reliability issues, because most of them are related to vegetation management, right? You have the other issues of vehicle hitting poles and so on, which would tend to happen, but that aspect of things is in fact a bigger issue that is causing the outages. The low voltage certainly is an issue. Chairman is right. I know he has also raised it several times in the boardroom, where we have to go and measure and check all these transformers, all the locations where we have the low voltage. Again, yes, I would say that we have reports that we do in fact get, and we will continue to make every effort to do better in there. Right? I don't want to say that we are not in that situation. We're not. I don't think we are, but certainly there are issues, and we really need to deal with it. To deal with it, it means we have to make sure that we identify the location, and I want to be fair to you that most of which we already have, right? That we have to get to it based on the order and priority of jobs. Of course, those that we don't have, we get the call-in reports. We take note of the call-in reports, and of course, the next step is to actually go and get the job done, right? So it's a matter of how we allocate our resources and deal with it in a more efficient way. Yeah, so that gap has to be better.
I think so, because I know the reports are done, but I find the response time is kind of long. And, it's something that maybe you could focus on a little more.
But if I could just add to what the General Manager said, I think it is something that is recognized. In my initial statement, I was saying that if you look at T&TEC, the main blocks of expenditure account for 90% of its expenditure. This is to pay the power producers, the cost of gas, and the cost of staff. I know we say we're not paying the gas, but we don't also get the revenue that we expect. You understand what I'm saying? Yes, I do. So that leaves 10%. And that is to manage the rest of the system, the distribution system. So generation is okay. The problem really lies in the distribution system. So for example, there's a town meeting in Point Fortin, and people in Cedros are saying, well, we have low voltage problem. There's a requirement for a substation. It's not that the power is not there. And when I refer to that, there's an area that needs to be enhanced, that 10%, that we need to have an enhancement there. So that system updates and proactive maintenance can take place, rather than us reacting. At the present time, I think there's a little bit of reaction. Something happens, so But that is because you don't have the resources to
Yeah.
look at it in its entirety and say, this is how we should tackle it.
Okay, thank you. Well, in addressing that issue of funding, I was wondering about your renewable energy projects. This is having, even at the household level, renewable energy systems for households, businesses, etc., as a project that could be rolled out, and there's a fee paid to T&TEC for allowing you to have this system and whatever. Is any thought, and other things, I see in the notes they have about the Beetham landfill project, and for solar and wind projects, etc. Where are you along with those types of initiatives?
Right, so let me, so in terms of renewable energies, there's a lot of discussion that is engaging the final attention for legislation to deal with what you call the feed-in tariffs. And that is for customers who will provide their own individual units at the various locations throughout the country of Trinidad and Tobago that they will utilize as renewables that will be used for their internal purpose, and of course with the extra capacity to feed onto the grid.
Right.
So that is in its process. The ministry that is engaged in discussion with the Ministry of Public Utilities. There is 3 projects, major projects that are on stream right now in terms of renewables. One is at the PAC Airport for 1.4 megawatts that is being dealt with right now in terms of a renewable project. The UAE is also dealing with the next one at the Queen's Park Savannah for 700 megawatts. And there's a third one that the government has just concluded at 130 megawatts. That is, 700 watts, and 1.4 megawatts. 700 watts, 1.4 megawatts. And there's a big one at 130 megawatts that we are about to engage discussion with a power purchase agreement. I wouldn't say too much on that because I'm waiting for the final details,
Okay.
but that matter has been closed from the information I have. So I'm just waiting for the final documents to come to T&TEC. We already have a draft PPA power purchase agreement. It's 130 megawatts, right, of capacity. And therefore that discussion will take place with the expectation. The process has already been completed, and that discussion will take place in terms of that engagement for that 130 megawatts of renewable energy.
Renewable.
Right.
And how far along are you with the legislation initiatives?
Member, I'll ask the electrification sector
Oh.
specialist.
Good morning again, members. We have at the ministry a first draft of proposed amendments. We have to go through it line by line, precept upon precept. It's a lot, and we have to make sure that we do it in alignment with all the other acts that relate to electricity services. So it's Act 50, 470, 71, 72, and 73. It is a lot of work. The work is, the second review of the draft is scheduled to start later this month.
And what's your timeline to have this thing completed?
We would need about 8 months.
Before it reaches where?
The Attorney General, most likely.
And that's to get on the legislative agenda. Because that's going to have an impact on the negotiations that T&TEC, no?
No,
It wouldn't.
no. The
Legislative-
100 and, may I?
Sure.
Okay. The 130 megawatts is a utility scale renewable energy project. The Regulated Industries Commission will do the license for that. T&TEC is going to negotiate with the persons who are awarded the tender for that, and that could go onto the grid. The one for the Queen's Park Savannah is going to be owned by the Trinidad and Tobago Legislative Commission, so license will not be necessary for that. Neither would a power purchase arrangement, but an agreement, a contractual agreement is necessary. And the one for the Airport Authority, even as we speak, we did a commercial license at the Ministry of Public Utilities in alignment with the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission and the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. That application is with T&TEC right at the moment as we speak. So
Okay.
it is not expected to take long because the major work of it has been done.
But it's for the other types of renewable energy projects or to feed into the grid that is the issue.
Okay,
Yes.
so no, not necessarily. The one at the Piaco Airport is
No, I understand that, but what about the other?
the other ones would require, yes, for the household, those will require legislation, not legislation, regulations,
I
and
see.
that has not started yet. The Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries is leading the effort for the feed-in tariff policy. The Ministry of Public Utilities is a part of that committee. We are in the process of revising a final draft for that feed-in tariff policy.
Thank you. Chairman, I just have one short
Ask your
question.
question.
I see the overtime rates. That was an issue raised at the last meeting. And while I understand that your human resource bank are dedicated people, etc., there is that issue of high overtime costs. And I was wondering what is being done to deal with it and really control it.
Right, so our basic salary and wages is in the vicinity of $800 million, salary and wages. When you analyze the overtime, except for 2016, where, so 16 was slightly lower, 17, 18, and 19 average about $83 million. 19 was a little higher than 83 because we had 3 different episodes in 2019. In July, September we had Karen, October we had another tremendously bad weather system. And in December we sent a significantly large team into Bahamas, Abaco, right? And they stayed there for roughly 25 days. And of course, when you look at those factors, it impacted a bit in 2019. The figures themselves, though, is about the same from year to year except 16. So it averages about 12% of your basic, right? The business operation, we do a lot of things to make sure that we don't have overtime. All our crews in the cable department is on shift. Our street lighting crews are on shift. Our emergency crews are on shift. Our utility crews are on shift. So we do have them round the clock 24 so that you don't have this call out. But you have situations in our business operation that require us to engage our team beyond the normal time. And we have looked at it. Yes, there are room for improvement. But I would be honest with you in terms of the statement. I feel there's little, though, when you look at our business operation. For example, in the city of Port of Spain, most of the work have to be done after hours. San Fernando in similar high street and so on, because you can't do work during the normal operating hours, right? You know, there are situations like that given, right?
Right.
So these are the sort of items that will impact on your overtime. But really, I've looked at it except 16. What caused the difference at lower value in 16? Because there was a negotiation in 16. So therefore, salaries went up in 17. And therefore, your value, when you look at the overall value, you see 17, 18, and 19 slightly higher than 16. But certainly, and of course, 19, I explained the issue with the different scenarios in 2019. But they basically remain and hover around the same value as we continue to make every effort to keep it low.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, congratulations, PS, and GM, Chairman, and your teams. Always very impressed with the work of T&TEC. But it would be remiss of me, just to follow on from colleagues Ayana Webster-Roy and Sharice C. Prasad about your service or lack thereof in terms of your customers as it relates to business and industrial parks and so on. And I have to say that I haven't been getting negative reports at all, but perhaps this is a meeting for updating. Tell us where you are with your fulfillment to the industrial parks, businesses, whether there are a lot of shortages, low voltage and so on, because you know the impact of that is costly. At the same time, our business, where are we with compliance in terms of business persons paying their bills, etc.? Are they the ones that are responsible for a large portion of your liquidity, not crisis, but matter?
All right, so the first issue, with regards to the business units, we especially the industrial parks, we maintain a high level of reliability in there. And that's because the design in there is significantly different in a number of locations. Most of the time, the substation is almost right at that zone, and the designs of those really, where the parks are set up and the business units are set up, right? The power is not very far. The actual capacity is not very far from those locations. So we continue to maintain a high level of reliability to the business units. Again, businesses going out of power for any reason, we respond very quickly because, you're talking about downtime affecting the business operations, people working and so on. So I would say on that side, I would say we have been doing fairly well with regards to the business units themselves. As you know, we are working on the Phoenix Park Industrial Estate.
Yes.
That is another business unit that is about to happen. And so all our processes have been completed, and we are just waiting to proceed. So again, we're ready and proceed at a very high level of reliability. Very important, because we know the kinds of operation that take place in there. So that factor is in fact so. So that would deal with basically the business. Now you're asked in terms of the compliance.
Yes. Happy customers, but do they pay their bills?
Right. So we have on the private accounts a total of $147 million outstanding, of which $123 million is the desalination plant.
Okay.
All right? So that really accounts for the biggest issue there. Other than that, it's small otherwise. All right? So $123 million is the desalination plant, 147 is the total value, which puts you about $20 million on the private accounts. That's it. All right? So we do manage all our private accounts as accurate as we could.
Zero in on excess capacity, and I looked at the report recommendations that you should engage stakeholders to find solutions or external partners for the additional capacity produced, the 388 megawatts and so on. And then you spoke about an intention to write to InvestTT. And I believe you did write to them indicating your availability of excess capacity on the grid. And of course, we all know the benefits of new projects to the country's revenue stream as well, and also increased revenues for you and so on. Now, it's an easy thing to write to say that we have excess capacity. And so can you find us some projects? But I think it takes more than that. And have you all sat down with them, or have you all sat down and formulated the types of projects and that we could probably look at and that will utilize a significant portion of electricity? And if so, pricing is another major factor, because InvestTT does not price. You price, and so my thinking is that your research department should be forward thinking in terms of the kinds of businesses and projects that InvestTT should be looking at, where the benefit to T&TEC would be tremendous, and we could utilize all of that excess capacity.
Yeah, Minister, that is a sort of complex question. Let me just start by saying with the excess capacity is not 388, as Mr. Ramsuk might have said. I don't. I think it's trying to get this balance properly. We remember that T&TEC is saying that it loses 11 cents for every kilowatt hour of electricity it sells. So you might ask, so why do you want to sell it? You know, the question could arise. I know you're speaking about development on a larger scale. I think we're trying to do two things in parallel. One is to reduce the capacity. I think the wisdom in that is related to the fact that you are aware one of the power plants is getting very aged. So there is an opportunity for retrofitting or updating that plant for the future, and therefore reducing your cash outflows in the immediate, which is the problem that T&TEC has at the moment. It wants to reduce the amount of expenditure. So that's one thing. So that is one activity taking place here. At the other case, we say, how do you sell the surplus capacity? So we are in discussions continuing at this moment with a major user of electricity, which could transform the amount of electricity that T&TEC may have to produce. It may accelerate the need to create new production in the country. And with that would be some philosophical questions. Do you in this environment conscious world, do you want to expand your capacity, or do you want to see what is happening to renewables and storage? So you understand me say it's a very big, complex issue. So we take what we have and say, how do you optimize that? We have this surplus, who is a customer that can take that? So that's happening on one hand. On the other hand, if we can reduce this, let's see what happens first. So the two things are happening in parallel. I mentioned earlier on to Mr. Leons that one was not too optimistic that the reduction matter will work. As I say, the person has a contract, he's saying, well, why should I give up anything? The other one is probably more promising, and we meet next week to continue those discussions. I didn't want to put the name of that particular, but it's a very large consumer who currently produces his own electricity, and T&TEC is trying to see whether it can get involved in producing electricity for them. Because their plant is getting aged and would need refitting. So the question is, do I refit it or do I buy from T&TEC? The issues are complex, and I want you to, I think at T&TEC we have been very mindful of the question of gas and the gas supply in the country. And every time you produce more electricity, you use more gas. Yeah. So the question really is that beneficial to the country? I know it is not. It depends on pricing, but T&TEC is constrained by RIC. So unless new arrangements take place with private developers for the true economic cost, those are the issues that we are grappling with at the moment.
So RIC would be responsible for pricing for large private purchasers as well.
Yeah, they have categories at the present. Even like Metal, for example, would have been like your biggest customer, which is a RATE. They classified in the amount of consumption. So, and T&TEC is constrained to sell that electricity at that price.
Yes.
So, I think those are the things. Yes, it's complex, and sometimes it requires decisions. T&TEC's input, of course, but at possibly a higher level.
Understood. May I ask one more question about the ease of doing business? Because, it gets, there's a catch-all now for ease of doing business. Are you satisfied that you are enhancing the customer experience, technology-wise, perhaps through digitization? Are you enhancing the customer experience? At the end of the day, that's what ease of business is about. And I say so for the individual, the residential and the commercial customer as well.
All right. Good morning, members. T&TEC currently has a number of initiatives to enhance customer experience. Things like e-billing, we are pushing e-billing so that customers can get their bills online, and what we call ECCPF, Automatic Credit Card Payment Facility, that they can pay their bills online as well, so that they don't have to come into our offices, they don't have to line up and have these long lines. They can, so that will make business a lot easier for the existing customers. We also provide services through the TT-Biz link, and we are pushing that where customers can sign up for accounts and so on without having to come into T&TEC. That is something that we have developed, and it is to be rolled out properly. It is not fully rolled out, but that is something that will give even customers who want to set up a business within Trinidad and Tobago the ability to do a lot of its transactions online. Right, so that will also, ease, provide a lot of ease in terms of ease of business. And in terms of, I want to just mention, we are implementing what we call a customer energy management application, where customers can now be in more control over their bills. They can determine what their average bill is like. They can see that over a period of time. They can set limits, and they can actually look at how they're going to conserve energy and reduce their bills. Right? There's
What's that called? What's that system called? Customer
energy management. Right? So it gives the customer a certain amount of control in terms of their consumption. We have an energy calculator will be in there as well, so they can see what, in terms of how much appliances that they have, they can enter that and project what their bill will be like. So we put in a lot of things in place that, in terms of technology to enhance the customer experience. Thank you.
And how soon will that be in place?
That should be in place within the next few months. Right? So this year for sure it will be in place. Okay.
The line minister is dealing with that also. That's an initiative of the Ministry of Public Utilities, and I know he's going to, he's the one who will, because he's really pushing that whole aspect of things. So I know that's going to come soon once it's ready and so on. He's going to bring it out to the public through the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Yes. At the end of the day, your customer wants to be able to do absolutely everything online and not come into your offices, and means also that you can close down some of your customer service offices and so on, and that itself is a cost savings. So I think the technology, the online features, those are things that you really have to focus on. Thank you.
Senator Harker.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies for being late. I reached home after midnight and had to catch myself to come up here 2.5 hours from Point 14. I have a question. I'll just start with a local question. In Point 14, you find a lot of times the transformers will blow. The same transformers will blow repeatedly, or the transformer look at a particular location will blow repeatedly, time without number. And there's no communication with the persons who live in the area, apart from those that call the hotline or those that are fortunate to meet the crew on site. There is no communication with the residents. Bearing in mind there may not be much residents associations in Point 14 for you to formally communicate with. What is the position on that? What is the policy on transformers repeatedly blowing? I say transformer, but everything looks like a transformer if you're not an expert, right? Repeatedly blowing, causing power outages, which of course affects safety and security as well as comfort. What is the policy on that at T&TEC?
Right, so in 2019, we had a number of issues at the Point 14 substation. We had failure of one transformer. We had some issues with the cable system at Point 14, plus what you call, there's a circuit board, 12 kV circuit board, that powers the different customers out of Point 14. So at different times during that 2019 period, we experienced different issues at that Point 14 substation. We have made some changes there, and we still have more changes to come. But we realized, though, an issue in Point 14, in that, which we know before, but we have to continue as we continue to expand, that at Point 14, it's at that location, you're feeding the Harriman location there, the Point 14 location there, and then you get across the Captiville, Saifu, all those areas there. So that position is at one source point. The plan is we are actively moving in a different direction with regards to that. We expect, I'm hoping by the end of 2020, by the Conservation Corp, right as you start to enter, as if you're heading along to Saifu, before Saifu, right? There is a location there where a substation was supposed to be established. That process has started. And we expect to establish that substation there so that once we do that, all the Trinidad feeder, what you call the Trinidad feeder, the Harriman circuit, the Point 14 circuit, all those circuits in that area, including Captiville, would be better off in terms of the reliability in that area. So that should get a little better. But coming back to the point though of circuits going and so on, yes, we once the call comes in, we do respond, but we know that we had in terms of 2019, it was not only best in that location.
Ask, so that deals with the general grid. But pardon the lack of technical jargon, I'm an economist, not an electrical engineer, but for example, I live in Harriman Park, and you have we call it a transformer, I assume it is, right? The thing that is on the pole.
Yes.
Right. And you may find that there may be about 3 grids on the same street, so some persons will go and some won't go, which is comforting because at least you'll have lights, which prevents crime from happening if the entire area goes. But why would those, because those are the smaller things, not the large substation, why would that be going repeatedly and not be replaced? Or is it very expensive for T&TEC to replace it? Or what are the challenges with that? Or what causes it? Is it an oversupply, or undersupply, overutilization, a bigger transformer is required?
All right, well, I'm hearing you say that, and I'm feeling very bad about it. I want to make sure you're clear on that, because I'm not very happy that you have lost supply and customers. Sometimes I don't get all the data, but that should not be happening. Let me make that clear. It's not a case where we don't have transformers, we have adequate supply of transformers. Why that could be happening is that sometimes you have recurrent outages. Vegetation might be an issue, but they don't clear the vegetation. Sometimes they go, and then they close back up. It could be, so we do have some birds, animal-related issues sometimes that cause outages, but of course there are protective devices that we use to correct that. If there's overload, the circuit is split and we put additional transformers. So the true answer to give you is that should not be happening. The recurrent, there's a system that we have in place that the emergency engineer must look at what you call the repetitive outages. If a particular area is going off very often, because we have the data, right? Because the report will be made, we would have responded, and so on. So it's to look at those repetitive outages and not just go when the supply goes, close up the fuse, and then go turn our backs. So as I say, it's just that we have to do better. I don't want to come and say different to that, but those are some of the reasons why you could be having those outages, and we should be addressing it. It's not an issue where we don't have the spares; we have the adequate spares.
And I really appreciate the forthrightness. I'm actually having a walkabout in Harriman Park this afternoon, and I will tell the residents that the other, we are here to serve the public. So the other issue that is mentioned in this report, in terms of the responses to the Public Accounts Committee on page 18, has to do with the issue of public debt. Is a line item that flows on the previous page, and the Commission's outreach programs in terms of targeting agencies and so on. I wasn't too sure why CJUS and Point 14 is on this list. Could you give an indication as to what exactly we are seeing here, so I can understand what the problem is?
Member, sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Right, so if you look on page 17, at the bottom of page 17 on the matrix, there's the revenue benefit issue. Public debt is that amount, and then the response is the Commission regularly participates in community outreach programs highlighting safety, conservation message, informing customers on its convenience services, including e-billing and so on. And then I see point 14 and CEDRA. So I just wanted to know if it was there for a particular reason, if there was a challenge with this community, or there was a particular resolution that T&TEC was trying to arrive at. So I just want to understand the reason for point and CEDRA being on that list.
No, these communities that we go through, we are going to several areas throughout the country. So this was just a matter of where was scheduled, not because there was a specific issue. Right?
Thanks. The other question has to do with the quality of infrastructure nationally. Is it, when last, if I were to use you, when last was an audit of T&TEC's quality of infrastructure at the national level for that services residential, commercial customers? I wouldn't speak to industrial because I'm sure that has to work properly, otherwise we won't have proper industries running. But the ones that service industrial and commercial and residential, because for example, to draw to another entity, WASA, another utility, WASA always gives an account as to what are the issues in terms of the national grid that causes leakages and so on, and what is required. So based on T&TEC's national infrastructure servicing customers, what is the confidence level in it, and what percent of it may need to be upgraded or not?
Right, so we have a planning department within T&TEC that looks at the entire grid. And that is one of the things we sort of pride ourselves in, because we look at the entire grid and we look at where expansion is necessary. That happens on a regular basis, where we target areas where you may be seeing increase in customer capacity, and therefore you need to look at the load-in and so on, the output capacity of the commission and so on. That whole exercise is also supported by the ministry's PSIP program, right? The Public Sector Investment Program. So typical examples of that would be like West Moorings, Pinto Road, Gandhi Village, those areas where we are looking at expansion work to increase the infrastructure, right? To make sure that it meets the requirement based on load growth, right? Based on issues of reliability and so on. So that's done fully by our planning department. The directives are passed to the various areas and engineers and so on, and that exercise is an ongoing exercise all the time. On an annual basis, we average about $250 to $300 million on capital expansion. That is one of the things we don't hesitate to always do, capital expansion. So we continue with our capital expansions, we identify our weak point areas and so on, but that's more on a macro level. But of course, at the individual levels, we also look at that within the areas and departments.
What I think I really wanted to ask is, for example, that issue that I raised at the beginning regarding my community.
Right.
But that doesn't happen with all the transformers in point 14.
Right.
So, for example, what percentage of, let's say, not to be so specific to transformers, but what percentage of the residential and commercial infrastructure of T&TEC needs to be upgraded, changed, improved?
If I were to look at the plant.
And if you don't have an answer, you can always present one.
I could say about a 10%, the 10 to 20% that requires further upgrade. Not that is in a situation that requires further upgrade.
Right. So would it be possible, once of course it doesn't take up too much of your financial resources, would it be possible to provide the committee with some literature in terms of that strength? Like, so for example, you can say in these districts, is up to 100%, in these districts, 70%. So then it adds value to our information. The burning question I had regarding the PPAs, the power purchase agreements that you mentioned, was at a prior session, T&TEC presented on the closure of ArcelorMittal, improving T&TEC's bottom line, but reducing T&TEC's demand from customers, all right? Because T&TEC was in a sense, the state was in a sense providing a benefit to the steel company, a benefit in way of a discount of some sort, right? Has the power purchase agreements fully displaced the drop in demand by ArcelorMittal?
Right. So just to put it in numbers, at the time when, in 2015, when they were more or less still in operation, the peak demand was 1396 megawatts with metal on the grid. The peak demand today is 1370 megawatts.
So you're definitely close
More or
up
less
to of
catching
the
up,
strength.
yeah, we're close.
Well, that's good. The other question many persons ask is, what is the potential, or how close are we, if we are saying we want to wean off gas utilization so that we can leave gas for the companies in the industrial estates? What is the feasibility at this time of persons producing their own electricity at the commercial level, not necessarily at the industrial level, and feeding it onto the grid where there's an excess?
Okay, there is no exact answer to that question. However, you have to find the perfect balance. Our consumption of electricity in the country, 54% goes to the downstream petrochemical industry, that's more than half. 34% goes to residential, 11% goes to light business, and 2% goes to the street lighting, right? Our downstream petrochemical industry requires really, really stable power to keep going. So any input of renewable energy into the grid, as you know, one of the factors related to renewable energy is that it is very, very intermittent, whether it be wind, solar. One of the more stable renewable sources is hydroelectric power, but that is not feasible in Trinidad and Tobago as the water source is not there. So we have to stick to the ones that are probably going to be feasible. Solar is feasible, but we haven't done something called a wind resource assessment project to check the real feasibility of a wind project. So right now, solar is feasible, but we still have to balance it very carefully. All the mathematics has to be done to do a perfect balance to see how much of our present fossil supply we're going to put onto the onto renewable energy. And as we go along, well, we are starting with the new utility scale plant, which is the exact numbers are actually 112.2 megawatts, and it is two plants. One is 92.2 megawatts, the other is 20 megawatts. The grid, because of its availability right now, can handle and integrate that amount of power easily. But as we move forward, we have to talk about things like storage and all the other technical issues that are related to having intermittent power replacing very, very reliable fossil power. So that is the conversation all the engineers are going to be having, and management and so on.
Thanks. My last question has to do with what was the subject of the budget presentation this year, and that this was supposed to be a year of LED bulbs being given to persons in light of power conservation. What is the status of that project?
That question is better answered by the... You have an answer?
Yeah, maybe have an answer.
All right.
Just kidding. I just think like that.
Okay, so the Commission has been tasked with the responsibility for managing this project in terms of the procurement of the LED bulbs as well as the distribution, right? So currently we have a tender that will be closed. I think tomorrow the tender is actually closing, the 12th of March. Right, and from there we will be doing the necessary evaluations and so on, and we hope that within the next couple of months, we can actually start the process of distributing the LED bulbs, 4 LED bulbs per residential account. Right, that we intend to start to actually distribute within the next few months.
And the last follow-up to that is what is the anticipated, given that residences account for over 30%, basically 1/3 of your consumption, correct, right? What is the anticipated impact in the reduction of the consumption at the residential level from the LED bulbs?
All right, I don't have the figures off the bat, but basically there will be, now we hope to get like a knock-on effect, because once, now four LED bulbs per customer is not much in terms of the overall, let's say the overall lights in a customer's installation. However, hopefully this will initiate the whole process for customers being more energy conscious, and they will, the uptake will be greater in terms of changing all your lights from incandescent to LEDs. And that, we will see a significant improvement. We hope to get something like about in the region of 20-30 megawatts. So it's a fair amount if we can get the uptake by customers.
So even with the LED bulbs, you have the rating would be in the region of 12 watts, and that will replace a 60-watt bulb. So it will be a significant savings if you disseminate it down to the total population eventually. So certainly it's a move in the right direction.
Senator Henry.
Yes. Morning, everyone. Like Senator Obak, a week I was also very late to get into the session. But let me start with some of the slightly, I hope is an easy question. In terms of the billing, updating the billing service of T&TEC, I mean, I still find myself waiting in the mail to get the paper bill. And how is your progress in terms of billing people online and text messages? I pay my flow bill when I get the email. TT sends me SMS messages. How is that program going?
All right. At this point in time, any customer that we have an email address available for, they can actually sign up for e-bills, to get e-bills. What we hope to do in the near future, however, is that once we have your email address, we can automatically, without you signing up, we can automatically put you to receive an e-notice where you will see your billing consumption and your cost. So that, hopefully very soon we can have,
so the customer has to go on and give you the email address.
Right. So
you
currently,
don't get it from some source.
Yes. So currently, the customer has to sign up. We can go to our website, and we call it our customer web access portal, and any customer right now can sign up to get their bills electronically, and they don't have to wait for the postage.
What
that may
proportion
or may
of
not come
people are
sometimes.
utilizing that right now?
What's that?
What proportion of your customers might be utilizing that?
Roughly 10%, about 45,000 customers are using e-bills at this point.
10%? So
about 10%, yes.
90% to go? That's,
Yes.
Okay. On a different note, the general manager talked about the overtime being relatively stable. I was just wondering, how does that work in relation to outsourcing? Is this overtime becoming stable or less because you haven't outsourced more of your activity or not? Or are you seeing decreases in both areas?
So the intention, of course, is to ensure that you utilize the internal resources to its full capacity before you outsource any of your activities. The issue, though, is there are certain activities that we we wouldn't normally outsource, like cable installation, cable jointing, and so on. So there are some activities of that nature that we don't always outsource. However, we do outsourcing. The tree trimming is quite significant with outsourcing. We do a lot of tree trimming outsourcing. We do street lighting outsourcing, street lighting repairs, and we also do outsourcing of our maintenance, some of our maintenance. Line clearing, yes.
Yeah, but my question is, has that been increasing or decreasing?
No, I would say it would be about the same with the outsourcing. It's only so much also in terms of resources you have on the outside with the outsourcing. But of course, our collective agreement restricts us also in terms of outsourcing as what you can do and what you can't do. Internally, you have to use the resources as first priority before you actually go to activities otherwise. The issues like janitorial and so on are not an issue because those are activities we don't do internally. and it also restricts us in terms of the time frame for outsourcing and so on.
No, I just wanted to be clear that
Sure.
your overtime isn't stabilizing because of outsourcing, and we're missing that.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of some of the renewable projects that were mentioned before, I mean, what is the net effect on that and in your viability?
Right. So
I got a little confused as to
right. So that one is an interesting one, and let's talk about it a little bit in terms of renewable projects. So I'm going to use figures to kind of say where we are. Right. Generally, with renewables, and the particular one in question that we are looking to engage at 130 megawatts, which is based on the efficiency. The efficiency of those plants are usually about 30%. Now, in renewables, you have so the best you could probably get these days outside. I'm not referring to the one that we're dealing with right now, because that has to negotiate. That is going through a negotiation. But you could look at about 4.5 US cents per kilowatt hour average. That's if you get down to the best in terms of pricing for renewables. Right now, if you look at what we do internally in terms of the existing generation, when you add generation, the figure itself, with regards to the cost for gas and the cost for generation, points to about the same value, 4.5. Now, if you take the renewables, then you're going to do good, because it means you're going to then replace what you have internally and you save on gas. But there's a problem. The renewables are in two categories: dispatchable and non-dispatchable. So the non-dispatchable is the figure I gave you at 4.5 cents. So in other words, you bring in 130 megawatts, when the sun shines, you get capacity. Cloud cover comes over, you must have capacity waiting to turn on. If you start to get into dispatchable, which is battery backup, right? The equivalent that could actually feed onto the grid, that's where the value goes up almost double the price. Of course, as the chairman rightly said, as technology improves, it's going to come down, right? But that's the issues right now in renewable. The issue, sir, is that whether the population, and I feel is a good point, is whether the population might be willing to pay the additional cost now, might be a little higher, right? Save on the natural gas instead of paying 3 or 4 times the cost in 10, 15 years from now. Because renewable exists, the sun exists, and all the items exist, so we have to make a decision of that nature. And it's something that we really have to engage a dialogue with the population in a bigger way.
No, I understand the problem with renewables is the storage.
Yes.
You know, that's a difficult part to solve in general in the whole world as a challenge. And it's not available when you might want it the most. So you have to store it and then bring it back. But I just wanted to get some idea. You see, the big picture in terms of if we are successful at renewables, how would that impact you? That was the overall gist.
Well, I would be happy whatever capacity I get, if I can save on gas wherever I can, right? Certainly it will help me down the road. But bear in mind, though, that I have capacity there also, right? But I also have to remember, as a utility, I have to move in that direction. It has to be driven there as a utility, or else what will 10 years from now say? So it will help? Yes, the answer to that is yes. And we have to go that way. We have to find the solution inside of there.
Okay, anyone else Ministry would like to go?
The GM has basically indicated it. We always have to find that mathematical balance, and we have to take into consideration that Trinidad actually has experience and do continue to experience a very high reliability of electricity. So any renewable energy that we are doing, we always have to do the maths, we always have to do the balancing, we always have to check the costs. So everything going forward, but yes, we are going towards renewable energy overall.
Okay. Just to go back to the issue of low voltage, I get the impression that it seemed like you were sounding like it was a rural or some other issue, but I live Diego Martin and we get low voltage fairly regularly. And I mean, so it's not a Tobago issue, it's not a Cedrus issue, it's kind of all over. And at what point would I be able to not buy surge protectors for every piece of electrical equipment that I
I'm going to turn that to Mr. Francois, and I'll tell you why. He was the area manager of the North. Diego Martin fall under him. He's now promoted to a different section, but it might be best that he answer that. Go ahead, Mr.
All right. Well, I think the GM mentioned that a lot of the challenges we would have had in terms of managing low voltage was the vegetation management, where, we have a lot of bushy areas, not necessarily rural, right, but areas that have a lot of vegetation. And the challenge in there is that we don't want to remove all vegetation because, there is an environmental responsibility that we have. But to remove just enough that the supply is reliable, right? And therein lies the little challenge.
Can you give me a little detail as to why the vegetation causes the problem?
Right. Okay. And what happens is that, no, vegetation is just one aspect, but anything that contacts the line itself, the line, you have overhead lines, HV, LVs. Those conductors, once you have a foreign interference, we have what we call a fault. And that fault would cause a dip in the voltage whenever a tree touches or a bird touches. It will initially cause a dip, and it can cause a full outage, right? A full outage, obviously we have to dispatch people to come and do the repairs and put the supply back.
All right.
But
I'm
if it's just
glad you
touching,
clarified that because
yes.
I thought it was something much more scientific.
Oh,
Right? So
yes.
I was all a while thinking it's some big scientific problem, and it's the birds.
You didn't know it was bush.
And the bush.
Birds, bush, but any foreign interference, a vehicle might hit the pole. If a vehicle hits a pole, the wires shake up and they come close together, they may touch. That's a fault. So anything that causes a fault, right, will cause a voltage dip or spike, and those are the kinds of issues that we get for the overhead line supplies. Right? Right? Yes. So basically that is the set of reasons. So we have routine maintenance that will treat with those. We try to ensure that we have our crews will go there and do routine maintenance to ensure that we minimize the occurrences of faults on the system. So that's essentially what we try to do, and it is ongoing. You asked the question, when will it end? It is always a cost to do certain things that will stop a problem. If you go underground systems are about 3 or 4 times more expensive than overhead line systems, but that will end that problem. And covered conductors, overhead line covered conductors is about twice the amount as well. So we're looking at an increase in the capital expenditure in order to end those problems. We try to do maintenance to minimize the problems, but they will still happen from time to time. So that's essentially what it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to ask a few questions, and then we'll have to bring this to a close. But I just want to clarify one thing. On November 1st, 2019, it was reported in a media article that members of the public were claiming that there was an unannounced increase in electricity rates. I just want to confirm that that is not true.
To the best of my knowledge, that is not true.
Okay. So there is no problem of...
Categorically, no.
No. All right. So there's no problem of misbilling or anything like that that would lead to that conclusion?
No, sir. There's no rate increase. And in fact, we don't have the authority at T&TEC for any rate increase. That is the RIC, the Regulated Industries Commission. There's no increase. Categorically, no.
Okay. Have you held any public consultations on the possibility of a rate increase? Because I know that that's the process that you said, which is RIC will pronounce on this and not before public consultation.
No, T&TEC didn't hold any public consultation.
All right, so that is not on the agenda. Now, you talked a lot about revenue. I'm talking now about the CEO. The CEO talked about revenue, and it seems that the strategy for revenue was really to counteract the need for an increase to the customer. So you're trying to solve by other revenue means and postpone the issue of a rate increase or defer the issue of a rate increase. What about expenditure reduction or cuts? Is that actively being pursued? I don't want to go into details of how, but if there are a couple of things that you are doing.
Right. So I think the chairman alluded to it when we speak about expenditure. The PPA costs $1.6 billion. Of course, we spoke of what we could do with regards to that, $1.6 to $1.7 billion. Gas costs $1 billion. So 60% of that pie, we really have little control over, right? Okay. So that's one aspect of things. Beyond that, you then deal with spares, $700 million, right? And then you have salary and wages, which is the only one that you have in there. That is 26% of the pie. So really that is, right? So we have looked at every avenue that we could reduce costs. Of course, wherever we can, we are looking at it. We spoke about the PPA and what we could do with the PPA, whatever, some of the things. How we dispatch, Chairman raised a very valid point. So how we dispatch our machines. So if you think of 3 cars and what pull in, or let's say 5 cars pull in a load, let's just use 3 cars. So 2 cars pull in a load, and normally in our business, you'll have 1 car standing by. So the moment 1 car shut down, that car standing by could take up that load and continue. The grid is just like that. So what we have is the machines carrying the load. And we used to have machines on standby, waiting in case one trips out to be able to pick up the additional load. Right. The thing about it is that if I have a car running for a whole day, it's going to burn gas. Gas is very costly. Yes. So therefore, we look at how we dispatch our machines very, very closely. That itself has saved us as much as $60, $70 million. That decision alone. Mm-hmm. How we dispatch our machines is very, very important. Those are a lot of things that we look at, right, when it comes to cost, right? Internally, we look at our employees. We look at, in terms of, as I say, we look at, how, in terms of the allocation of work to make sure we bring on our customers as quickly as possible so cash to register generates revenue, right? Those are the, a number of initiatives that we do to try to deal with expenditure on the expenditure side. Everywhere we could look at it, we look at it.
I get the impression from what you're saying now and what you said before, that your strategy on T&TEC is changing. First of all, you do not want to utilize as much natural gas as you used to before.
Because I don't pay for it.
And secondly, you want to transform your production inputs into the T&TEC grid to renewables. So you are moving directly into these 2 strategies as an active pursuit of a T&TEC plan, is that correct?
Right, so you're quite correct because because of the issue with the gas, our effort should be to use the least amount of gas. Let that gas go on to be sold at the higher price because we get it at a premium, at a reduced rate, right? Okay. So that is our strategy, to use less gas. And of course, as we continue to utilize and use up all our existing capacity, certainly we will incorporate the renewables onto the grid, and we want to incorporate the renewables onto the grid, which will, of course, result to additional gas savings.
Is that influenced at all by the change in the price at which producers are to be paid now, and its implications for NGC, which would then imply either a higher price for you or a higher subsidy to the state?
So that's an excellent point. So as it stands, we pay, as I say, half the price, $1.54 per MMBTU. Yes. That has been kept very constant because I could say that the state that's a sensitive issue, and they have kept that very constant to keep the price to where it is right now. I wouldn't be able to answer beyond that, of course. I don't think we'd be able to venture.
Yeah. I think there is a concept of a power tranche, but that is outside of T&TEC's remit. That has to do with the upstreamers, the producers of the gas, the ministry, and they would deal with that. And there's something termed a power tranche, which is sold at a special rate. But that is, we are out of T&TEC's control.
Now, the other thing is that you said that the only debt you really have is an NGC debt. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that there are special arrangements being made for that by the intervention of the Ministry of Public Utilities and the other agencies of government, right?
That is correct. That's transformed into a
But
loan.
what about Petrotrin owed T&TEC $36,628,240 as at January 31st, 2020. Is that, excuse me, is that still a debt that they owe to you, and has that been passed on now to Heritage, or does it not exist for you anymore?
Right, so that dialogue did take place with Petrotrin. That debt is related to the refinery.
Okay.
The refinery, as you know, would have been operating.
But it's still money that they owed you, right?
It's still money that they owe
They've
us,
closed
correct.
down, but
so
they
that
owe you.
discussion is taking
Right.
place, and that refinery moved from 60 megawatts to 10 megawatts. But we expect that it will go back up.
Yes.
And therefore, that discussion, that matter is engaged in the discussion of the Commission and Heritage.
So that means it's a Heritage debt now, and the negotiation is between T&TEC and Heritage.
The discussion, yes, with parties at Heritage. I wouldn't want to answer if it's a Heritage debt, but we are engaging with personnel in that department.
Okay. Now, when the chairman spoke earlier, and he said that about 10% of the expenditure focused on development, that is the space you had on development and maintenance. I hope I got you right. And I just want to ask something. How do you decide, if you have basically only a 2% unserviced population, and you have basically 98% of your population in both households and business covered, how do you determine development needs? And I have a simpler question for you, which is really constituency-based. When people come, for instance, to my office as an MP, and they indicate that there are light poles that get to point X, but there are 16 other houses further down, and they need more light poles to get those 16 houses addressed with electricity. The first question is a more, what can I say, a strategy question. How do you determine how you make your development expenditure? And the second one is, how do you deal with that kind of request?
How our business is set up is that any request for supply, we do a survey, and we look at where our last point of infrastructure is and what is required to bring the infrastructure to meet the requirement. That is costed. So there's a cost because we have to carry the infrastructure in, so there's a dollar value in there. We then look at the revenue, that the return from generated, and it's offsetted with a formula, and that difference in the cost is what is factored in there, that is sent to the customer. So
those development costs on request is a shared cost?
That is correct.
T&TEC and the customer?
That's correct, capital contribution, yes.
And do you take these developmental initiatives only on the basis of customer demand, or other considerations?
In terms of what we do look at requests that we get, we interact with, just to make sure I'm answering you correctly, we interact with a number of agencies, and they give us, InvestTT is an excellent example of one, and they give us an idea of what their plans are, and we use that to make that decision.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that is a very hard question. It really is it's a national question, but I can't leave this table if we're talking about T&TEC without raising this issue when this entire discourse is really for the public of Trinidad and Tobago to understand what we are about, which is that the whole competitiveness framework for industry in Trinidad and Tobago is based largely on the price. They are not the only factors, but they are based largely on the price of natural gas and on the price of electricity. Okay? That is the basis on which Point Lisas has operated. That is the basis on which the manufacturing sector operates. That has been the basis of a contention, for instance, between Jamaica and ourselves in terms of our manufacturing competitiveness. Now, how does this issue figure in the thinking of T&TEC in terms of a national strategy if the basis of competitiveness up to now has been natural gas price and electricity price?
That's a difficult question, Chairman. And
that's why I alerted you. And I don't expect you to give me a perfect or a textbook answer. But if you can share with me your thinking on the matter, I think it would be important for the public.
I think that I would be inclined to say that that responsibility lies outside of T&TEC. As a board, I think T&TEC must focus its attention on what is its duty, what is its mandate, to provide electricity for the state in an efficient, reliable, and economical manner. So that is the focus here. The philosophy of what the nation's development ought to be, or is, or should be, I think lies in a different.
I agree with you.
So
I agree with you.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think what as TNTEC, what we do is really just to give the best advice all the time so that the best decisions are made. I mean, it's a sort of dilemma we were talking about early on, that you go to renewables, for example, but from a strict TNTEC point of view, you would say if we put 130 megawatts of renewables on the grid, then TTEC enters into a power purchase agreement. It does not lessen the power purchase agreement that already exists, so it becomes an expense to TTEC. Yes, it is going to save some gas, which is a good thing. The nation needs the gas. So there is this kind of cycle, and I think it will find its equilibrium. I mean, so let's say if you talk about one philosophy, one could be, say, do you stay where you are with generation now and wait to see what the developments are? You hear a lot of talks in the United States by presidential candidates that, you know, we have to move away from this orthodox power, the environment is going to ruin, and all of that. So maybe in the near future, you may have developments in battery technology. A team of us from T&TEC went to Jamaica where they have installed battery storage. That is just to stabilize their system. When you put renewables, the whole grid gets into its own, there are a whole host of difficulties that you have to solve. So one philosophy could be to say, let us manage what we have and prolong the time to see what developments take place in the world. So that's one piece of advice.
Hoping that smart technology may provide a solution.
Because do you hold on to the surplus and manage it? And that's one philosophy. The other will say is that if you did that, you are retarding development, because it means that you're starting to mark time, waiting to see for something to happen. I think these decisions really are the important conversations, Chairman, I agree, but I think that that kind of decision would not really lie with the TTEC board. So TTEC focuses largely.
But the issue of the price of electricity is central to that, though.
Absolutely.
That's why I'm raising it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. You know, and that is a decision that has to be made. How the impact, for example, as you were talking about, say if you raise it from $1 to $1.60, is 60%, you can well imagine what the impact that will be. We don't have to be economists to know that inflation will just run away. So that at a macro level, people who are more qualified than we are will look at that and see what it happens to in the national scale. But TTEC ought to say, look, even if we produce electricity at that price, that is a world competitive price. That is our duty.
Yes.
And I think that is where we keep our focus, sort of batting in your crease, if you like.
Okay, I appreciate your answer and your candor. PS, do you want to say anything on this subject or anything else, because we're going to close now?
Ask my DPS to make a few comments.
Well, just to say, Chair and members, that, the discussions that what the chairman just spoke about is part of the wider discussions that we have been having at the Ministry of Public Utilities. Today we spoke about electricity generation from fossil fuel, and we spoke about renewable, but there are two other steps in between: the issue of energy conservation and energy efficiency, with which we are also making a concerted effort to reduce in the country. So the discussions with T&TEC, because it is going to have a negative impact in terms of T&TEC and the demand, but overall for the country as a whole, it is going to benefit because of the same arguments of the natural gas going into higher valued activities. So that continues to be part of the discussions that we are promoting at the Ministry of Public Utilities. T&TEC has been extremely supportive, understanding the bigger picture that as a country, in an environment in which climate change is a significant factor, and the move to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is critical for us in meeting our international commitments, that we are continuing along the road because we think this is the best thing to do for the country and for our island state in these times of climate change.
All right. I want to thank you very, very much for being here and for answering all the questions in a very, very forthright manner. PS, I want to thank you. Deputy PS, I want to thank you. I can't see what your designation is from here, but I can see your name is Julal, so I want to thank you as well. Chairman, I want to thank you for your straightforward answers and considered answers. And CEO, Mr. Ramsuk, I want to say that you've been really forthcoming with us with all the answers. I think both you and the chairman indicate that T&TEC is a pretty well-run organization that is very customer-driven, and we're happy to hear that. We just want you to do better because we want the country to do better. And so some of the hard or complex questions that we asked was really out of concern. We did not raise anything about what's happening in the country now and in the world now. I mean, they closed the stock market on the New York Exchange this morning. The reason for that has nothing to do with what is happening in the financial sector. It has to do with what's happening in the health sector, which has an impact on the business and economic sectors and consequently on the financial sector. So we didn't even talk about that, and it is inevitably going to impact us. And we are already feeling it in terms of the price, the reduction in price of natural gas and oil. And there are so many geopolitical wars as well in relation to that energy sector, which has been under transformation for the last 10 years. And we are inevitably going to feel the impact, and all of us are going to have to adjust, including T&TEC and so on. So we did not raise those issues, but the issues that you raise, even not taking these things into account and that we shared here, are pretty challenging in themselves, both for you as an institution and for the country as a whole. So we cherish the opportunity to engage you in this way. I think you know that my colleagues always ask questions that are uppermost in their mind, and also questions that really sort of are disturbing them about either the business you conduct or what is happening in the country. And I think you got a share of that today, and I want to thank my colleagues for doing that. And I want to thank you again for your forthright answers, both the ministry and T&TEC. And I think we have a better picture of what's happening, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you very, very much.